Hey guys, tonight we wander into a world where the night doesn't just belong to darkness, it belongs to peculiar rituals, odd habits, and bedtime practices that might make you question your own cozy mattress. Imagine stepping out of your modern bedroom, where the soft hum of your fan is your lullaby, and landing 1,000 years back, where shadows stretch longer than your imagination and you probably won't survive this without a few weird lessons. The air smells faintly of smoke, herbs, and the faint tang of livestock, because, yes, humans didn't just go to sleep like you do now, they prepared for night like it was a siege. And you are right there, in the middle of it, feeling every creak and whisper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, comment your location and local time. I want to know where in the world you're cozying up for this strange little journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander down a torchlit path, the cobbled stones uneven under your feet, their edges worn smooth by generations. The torches sputter in the cool evening air, casting flames that stretch long shadows across timber-framed houses. People are settling in, but not in the way you might expect. Beds aren't always the center of attention. Some households build small, straw-filled platforms along the walls, others line their floors with woven mats. You crouch near the doorway of one home, curious about the low, murmuring conversation. It's not gossip. They're discussing where the fire should be positioned tonight. Fire, back then, is a nightly guardian. Not just for warmth, but for warding off spirits, stray animals, and the occasional overly curious neighbor. You can almost feel the tension in the air as families decide which room gets the hearth's glow. Scholars still argue whether the positioning of hearths was more about safety or superstition, but as you watch the glow reflect in wide-eyed children's faces, you realize both forces coexist, weaving a nightly ritual that's at once practical and deeply mystical. The smell of burning wood is oddly comforting, though a little acrid. You notice that some families sprinkle herbs into the flame, lavender, mugwort, perhaps a hint of juniper. The smoke curls and drifts like lazy dancers, carrying an intent to purify the space. Some of these herbs, you learn, were believed to bring better dreams, though the scientific side of you raises an eyebrow at whether this was chemistry or just old superstition. Oddly enough, you start imagining what it would feel like to lie under that curling smoke, inhaling whatever promise of sleep it carries. Moving past the hearth, your eyes catch on the sleeping arrangements. Beds are smaller, communal, sometimes tiered with thick blankets, often stuffed with straw, feathers, or a patchwork of rags. You notice some people don't even lie down. They perch on stools or low benches for a short rest before returning to nighttime chores. The idea of 8 uninterrupted hours seems laughable here. You try picturing your modern mattress in this scene, it feels almost alien. And yet, there's a rhythm to this chaos, a tacit understanding that rest is a shared experience, not a private one. You shuffle closer to a particularly crowded room. A man coughs quietly into a handkerchief, while a woman hums a low tune, seemingly to calm both herself and the children. You notice a small cat winding between ankles, a nocturnal helper for pest control, it seems. Lice, fleas, and the occasional mouse were all nightly visitors, and humans had to adapt. Some households swore by rubbing vinegar into bedding, others simply tolerated the discomfort, passing down a resilience that modern sleepers rarely need to consider. A scholar once argued that medieval sleep was more about social coordination than individual rest. And watching this room, you can see why. The fire's warmth is communal, the bedding shared, the night itself a collective undertaking. You begin to feel the intimacy of this arrangement, the way that light, sound, and scent all intersect to create an environment that's simultaneously chaotic and oddly protective. Even as a visitor, you sense the invisible boundaries drawn by experience and habit. You meander to the back of the house, where the air smells stronger of herbs and dried flowers. Here, a tiny ritual unfolds. A mother sprinkles a pinch of crushed herbs under her child's pillow, muttering a barely audible charm. "Sleep well, wanderer of dreams," she whispers, as though the words themselves hold tangible power. You can't help but smile at the mixture of care and superstition. This isn't mere folklore, it's strategy, handed down, refined, and deeply human. You might chuckle to yourself, imagining modern parents fumbling with essential oils and sleep playlists, unaware that they're participating in a centuries-old tradition of nightly experimentation. Stepping back into the corridor, your senses adjust to the dim torchlight and soft, muffled voices. The night is alive in ways you rarely experience. The crackle of the fire, the low hum of conversation, the soft shuffle of feet on straw-strewn floors. You notice that even the quiet moments are punctuated by small, purposeful sounds, closing a door gently, shifting a blanket, the tiny squeak of a hinge. You start to appreciate how sound shapes sleep. Scholars still debate whether silence or soft noise truly aids rest, but here, in this thousand-year-old house, you see that both are harnessed, intentionally or not, to create a nightly cocoon. You wander outside again, letting the cool air hit your face. The street is shadowed, but not silent. A dog barks distantly, horses shift in their stalls, and an owl hoots lazily from a nearby beam. The world outside the home seems equally alive, equally governed by habit and superstition. You think about how modern sleep isolates you from these sensory companions, and you feel a curious pang of nostalgia for a night you've never lived. As you prepare to step back inside, a small, almost comic scene unfolds. A man tiptoes toward his bed with exaggerated caution, as if the straw itself might bite. You stifle a laugh. These moments of human absurdity echo through time. Sleep, it seems, has always been a blend of necessity, ritual, and bizarre human improvisation. And you, wandering through this night, are just beginning to understand how intricate and strange the pursuit of rest can be. With the fire flickering and the gentle, herb-scented smoke curling around you, you finally allow yourself to pause, leaning against the doorway. There's comfort here, in this odd combination of fear, care, and community. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize that the night is not merely a backdrop, it is an active participant in human life, shaping behavior, shaping dreams, and shaping the very art of sleep itself. You step further into the flickering glow of the night, drawn toward the warm hum of hearths scattered throughout the village. The air here is a curious mixture of smoke, cooking scents, and that faint, earthy tang that seems to linger in medieval streets long after the last person has passed. You notice that each home has its own nocturnal rhythm, a subtle choreography dictated by firelight, conversation, and ritual. Even standing still, you feel yourself moving to their tempo, toes tapping against cobblestones, heart sinking to the distant clatter of shutters and the low murmur of a woman soothing a restless child. Families gather around their hearths not just for warmth but for protection. You realize that fire serves a dual purpose. It keeps the dark at bay, and it serves as a social anchor, pulling the household together into a cocoon of light and safety. You hear whispers about spirits and demons that roam the night, tales that may be superstitious or perhaps rooted in real dangers, like thieves or wild animals. Scholars still argue whether these fears were genuinely mystical or simply a way to explain the unpredictable. You feel the tension in the room, the way each crackle of wood and flicker of flame reinforces a shared understanding of the night as both friend and foe. You glance at the bedding near the hearth. Straw-stuffed mattresses are everywhere, sometimes topped with quilts or thin blankets, creating an uneven patchwork of warmth. You notice that children often sleep between adults, their small bodies forming a living barrier against imagined threats. The concept of personal space seems laughably foreign here, replaced by a sense of communal safety. You crouch beside a bench, your eyes tracing the careful arrangement of pillows, blankets, and furs. Oddly, the smells of smoke, wool, and herbs mingle into a soothing cocktail that almost lulls you into drowsiness on its own. Smoke plays a fascinating role in these nightly rituals. Some families burn herbs deliberately chosen for their soporific properties, mugwort to induce vivid dreams, lavender to calm restless minds. You watch a woman scatter a pinch of dried herbs across the embers, watching them curl into faint, ghostly spirals. You inhale, curious at the faintly bitter fragrance, and realize that this act is both practical and magical. The smoke masks odors that might attract pests while also comforting the household. You note to yourself that centuries later, people will still insist on lavender sachets and chamomile teas, unknowingly following in the footsteps of these early experimenters with sleep. You wander closer to the conversation near the hearth, catching snippets of discussion about the night ahead. Children are hushed, adults share practical advice, and the occasional joke punctuates the tension, a reminder that humor, even when whispered, has always been part of coping with darkness. You hear the soft clink of a pot as a mother stirs a small late-night brew, probably some sort of herbal tea meant to lull a restless child into slumber. You feel the hum of life around you, the layers of activity that continue even after the sun has long gone. Outside, the village streets are dotted with oil lamps and torches, each casting a small circle of light against the darkness. You notice people moving quietly between buildings, some running errands, others checking on neighbors, and some simply taking a short stroll to clear their heads before bed. You realize that the boundaries between work, leisure, and rest are fluid at night. The household continues to function as a small, interdependent ecosystem. Scholars still debate whether medieval society had structured bedtimes, or if sleep was more opportunistic, dependent on chores, seasonal rhythms, and personal health. Observing this scene, you start to lean toward the latter. Sleep here feels like a delicate balance, achieved through both ritual and adaptability. You pause outside a particularly lively home. Children laugh softly while a dog curls around the hearth, its body a living extension of the cozy heat. A man fans embers with practiced motions, while another checks the doorway, muttering to himself about keeping the spirits at bay. The interplay of domestic labor, superstition, and care fascinates you. Each small action, stoking the fire, arranging straw, whispering charms, has meaning and intention. You feel like an intruder in a sacred routine, yet also strangely honored to witness it. Smoke and sound are your companions now. You follow a faint trail of herbal smoke down a narrow alley, curious about its source. The scents seem to guide you, almost like a map of nocturnal life. You pass by an open window, catching a glimpse of a family huddled together, their voices low but purposeful. You notice the layering of tasks. The youngest children are fed and settled, the older ones practice quiet games, and adults finish chores that could not wait until morning. Each movement is careful, deliberate, designed to maintain safety and peace within the home. You can almost feel the rhythm of the hearth, pulsing outward like a heartbeat through the village. You stop by a communal well, its stone edges slick with evening dew. A lone figure draws water, moving with quiet efficiency. You realize that water collection at night is both practical and symbolic. Practical because it avoids the daytime heat, symbolic because the night carries a sense of transition and reflection. Scholars still argue whether nocturnal errands were primarily functional or if they also served a social or ritualistic role. As you watch the figure, you lean toward both, practical and ceremonial, a testament to the layered complexity of medieval life. The sounds of nocturnal animals add another layer to the night's atmosphere. You hear an owl swoop silently overhead, a dog bark somewhere in the distance, and the subtle rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. You notice that families arrange sleeping areas not just for human comfort but to mitigate encounters with these small invaders. Cats are stationed strategically, their eyes glowing in torchlight as they patrol the room. You smile at this old strategy, imagining it as an early, if imperfect, form of pest control, an intimate partnership between humans and animals forged in the service of sleep. You wander back toward the warm glow of a home where the hearth blazes a welcome. Inside, a man mutters quietly as he sets up a small bundle of straw, while a woman hums softly to a child trying to resist sleep. The interplay of sounds, smells, and movement creates a lullaby for the senses, a symphony of subtle cues signaling it's time to rest. Even as an outsider, you feel the tug of this rhythm, a gentle pull urging you to slow down, breathe deeply, and let your mind wander in tune with theirs. Near the fireplace, a small debate unfolds. One elder insists that certain herbs must be burned every night, while another claims it's better only during the full moon. You note that these disputes are not trivial, they reflect deep-seated beliefs about health, luck, and the unseen forces governing night. Scholars still argue whether these practices were rooted in medicine, superstition, or a blend of both. You can't help but admire the care with which these rituals are debated, the precision with which they are enacted. There's an elegance to the logic, even when it feels mysterious to your modern eyes. A small child yawns, snuggling into a pile of straw and fur. You feel the soft rhythm of breathing, the faint warmth, and a sense of peace settles over the household. Even in the midst of strange habits and protective rituals, sleep is a universal balm. You notice yourself mimicking the child's posture, shoulders loosening, eyelids heavy, your body responding to the cues of warmth, sound, and rhythm that surround you. It's an odd, almost magical thing, how human behavior centuries ago can affect you in the present, simply through observation and shared experience. You step back outside once more, taking in the glow of lanterns and the flicker of hearths across the village. There's a quiet harmony in the chaos, a balance between fear and comfort, ritual and necessity. You realize that these midnight hearth rituals were more than just a nightly routine. They were a blueprint for coexistence, an intricate choreography that allowed humans to rest safely and meaningfully in a world governed by shadows. As you wander down the cobblestone lane, you carry this sense of wonder with you, letting it guide your footsteps into the deeper mysteries of the night. You drift through the dimly lit doorway into a room filled with the faint, earthy scent of straw, herbs, and worn wool. The air is cooler here, but not cold. It carries a quiet stillness, a kind of anticipation, as if the very walls know that sleep is about to take over. You notice the beds first. Low, roughly constructed frames, their surfaces layered with straw, rushes, or coarse blankets. You run your fingers along the rough edges, feeling the uneven texture, imagining the thousand stories embedded in every fiber. Back then, comfort was relative, and ingenuity often trumped luxury. The very act of arranging bedding was an art form, one passed down through generations. Straw, surprisingly versatile, serves multiple roles. You observe the young children curled into small mounds, the older siblings sprawled across slightly raised platforms, and adults sitting nearby on benches or folding stools. Scholars still argue whether these straw beds were primarily for hygiene or simply the most available resource. From where you stand, it seems both functional, inexpensive, and replaceable, yet pliable enough to mold into a surprisingly effective night's rest. You notice that the straw is often layered with herbs like lavender or mugwort, tiny aromatic signals designed to soothe and repel pests simultaneously. Some beds are elevated slightly off the floor, others are directly on the packed earth. The variations tell stories of wealth, status, and personal preference. You crouch beside one bed, noticing the careful way straw is tucked into corners and bound together with twine. The patterns are almost decorative, revealing a subtle artistry in something so ostensibly mundane. Even more fascinating, some families add small personal touches, a ribbon of cloth, a scrap of leather, or a handful of dried petals. You can almost hear the whisper of the ancestors, "Rest well, and guard your dreams." You glance around and spot the oddities that punctuate everyday sleeping arrangements. In one corner, a small rodent trap lies in wait, while a cat lounges nearby, its tail flicking lazily. You smile, recognizing that pest control was a constant, almost theatrical, aspect of sleep hygiene. Lice were common, fleas rampant, and mice persistent intruders. Some households rubbed vinegar on their straw to deter vermin, others relied on cats and sheer vigilance. You can feel a creeping empathy for these ancient sleepers. Their night was never truly uninterrupted, yet they managed to carve out their own little sanctuaries. The sensory landscape of these rooms is striking. You inhale the mingling aromas. Smoke from the hearth drifting in through open doors, the faint tang of sweat, the sweetness of dried flowers and herbs. Sound, too, is layered. Low murmurs of conversation, the occasional shuffle of feet, and the rhythmic breathing of those already dozing. Even without modern clocks or white noise machines, these subtle cues orchestrate a nightly symphony that signals rest. You lean against a wall, taking it all in, feeling a rare connection across centuries. Some families practiced unusual sleeping positions or rituals designed to optimize rest, or at least to reduce nighttime disturbances. You notice a man lying partially upright, supported by cushions, while a woman nearby keeps a small lamp lit, its flame a quiet guardian. Oddly enough, some humans even preferred sleeping fully clothed or with small personal objects tucked close to them, a combination of superstition, practicality, and comfort. Scholars still argue whether these habits were psychologically motivated or purely practical. Watching them, you can see elements of both fear, habit, and the pursuit of a night's uninterrupted peace. You wander to another bed, where a small child clutches a doll-like figure, its fabric faded but carefully mended. This child sleeps with a kind of ritualized determination, shifting slightly in response to the gentle nudge of an elder checking on them. You sense the deep layering of care. Bedtime is not simply about sleep, it is about reassurance, safety, and the transmission of tradition. Even the placement of the pillow, the type of straw, and the careful sprinkling of herbs are imbued with meaning. It's easy to see why sleep in this era is more than physiological, it's cultural, social, and profoundly human. You notice some odd sleeping habits that might seem bizarre today. Certain individuals prefer multiple short naps throughout the night, while others sit near the hearth, nodding off intermittently. You observe a mother rocking her baby while keeping an ear open for the creak of the floorboards, a dog, or the occasional visitor. Sleep is segmented, opportunistic, and intimately tied to the rhythms of daily labor. Scholars still debate whether this biphasic or polyphasic sleep pattern was universal or simply a regional quirk, but here, watching these careful, repeated nods and sighs, you sense that flexibility is key. Herbal fumigation continues to play a subtle role. You see a small bowl of burning herbs placed near the bed of a restless child. The smoke curls toward the ceiling, carrying scents meant to soothe and protect. You realize that the fumigation serves more than a practical purpose, it's a performative act that reassures both child and adult alike. Oddly, you feel a sense of calm just observing this practice. Modern sleep aids might come in bottles or apps, but here, smoke and touch are the tools of choice, intimate and immediate. Pest encounters shape the night as much as fire or herbs. You notice small rodents scuttling along the edges of the room, carefully avoided but rarely eradicated entirely. Cats, trained by instinct, patrol tirelessly. The awareness of these invaders creates a rhythm of vigilance woven into sleep itself. You realize that the human capacity for adaptation is incredible. People of this era learned to sleep soundly even amid chaos, finding comfort in routines, communal presence, and the odd reassurance of a cat's lazy purr. You watch a family member adjust the bedding with meticulous care, shifting straw, rearranging blankets, and murmuring softly. You begin to understand that these motions are almost meditative, a nightly preparation that signals the mind and body to slow down. Scholars still argue whether such rituals primarily affect psychological readiness or physical comfort, but you feel the effect even as an observer. You sense your own pulse slowing, your attention sharpening on the rhythms around you. You notice that children are often the center of sleep strategies. Their presence dictates warmth distribution, placement of herbs, and even timing of bedtime rituals. A small sibling cluster, nestled together, shares warmth and security, a living barrier against both environmental and imagined dangers. You recognize that these practices build social cohesion as much as they promote rest. Even as a modern visitor, you feel the subtle lessons, care, awareness, and respect for cycles of life that govern the human night. You linger near the window, listening to the distant sounds of nocturnal life. Horses shift in their stalls, owls call softly, and leaves rustle with the night breeze. These ambient noises, once a threat, now feel comforting, a rhythmic counterpoint to the firelight and whispered conversations inside. Sleep in this era is not about isolation, it's about engagement with the night, finding peace amid activity, danger, and life itself. As the night deepens, you take in the layered complexity of these sleeping arrangements. Straw, herbs, vigilance, fire, communal closeness, they all intersect in an intricate web that supports rest. You realize that even the quirkiest habits, from unusual positions to intermittent dozing, are all part of a delicate equilibrium. You feel a strange kinship with these sleepers, an awareness that across a millennium, humans have always found ways to nurture rest, however chaotic or unconventional the methods. Finally, you settle in the corner, letting the sights, sounds, and scents wash over you. The night here is tactile, intimate, and oddly reassuring. Sleep is not merely a physiological necessity, it is an active, deliberate practice, woven into the fabric of daily life and personal ritual. You close your eyes for a brief moment, imagining yourself wrapped in straw and herbs, soothed by the soft flicker of firelight and the gentle murmur of a household embracing night. You step into the cool night air, leaving behind the intimate chaos of straw beds and flickering hearths, and suddenly you're immersed in a rhythm entirely different from the warm, smoke-scented rooms. The village stretches out under a moonlit sky, streets quiet but alive with subtle motion. Here, the night is segmented, divided into phases that dictate not only sleep but social life, chores, and even spiritual reflection. You sense that the concept of one long night's sleep is alien in this world. Instead, humans embrace a pattern that modern scholars call the biphasic or segmented sleep rhythm. You wander past shuttered homes and open doors, catching glimpses of people already dozing, some stirring from brief rest periods, and others preparing for a second wave of activity before dawn. You notice that families tend to divide the night into two main periods: the first sleep, beginning shortly after dusk, and the second sleep, following a quiet wakeful interval. During that interval, people might rise to pray, tend fires, eat a small snack, or even visit neighbors. You pause, considering how strange this seems to your modern mind, trained to expect uninterrupted rest. Scholars still argue whether segmented sleep was universal or if it depended on latitude, season, or occupation. Observing the village, you feel convinced that practicality and habit both played essential roles. The night itself is a canvas for human activity, and sleep is simply one of many brushstrokes. As you stroll down the uneven cobblestone streets, you notice soft light spilling from a doorway. A woman moves quietly with a lantern, her actions deliberate and unobtrusive. She carries a small basket, pausing occasionally to adjust the flames. You realize she's preparing something for her household's second sleep period: a warm drink, perhaps a herbal concoction meant to coax drowsiness, or maybe a snack to stave off hunger. You catch a whiff of roasted grain and dried herbs, and it's oddly comforting, reminding you that food and rest were intimately linked in these nocturnal routines. The night is alive with hushed movement. You hear footsteps along the street, muffled voices, the soft jingle of a tethered animal. Each sound is deliberate. No one wants to disturb those already resting. Even in this quiet interval, social awareness governs behavior. People are out not randomly but intentionally, engaged in minor tasks or gentle social visits, maintaining the delicate balance between action and rest. You can almost imagine the scholarly debates over these behaviors. Were they driven by necessity, superstition, or social cohesion? In reality, the night is a mixture of all three, each reinforcing the other in subtle, almost invisible ways. You notice that during this first wake interlude, individuals often engage in activities we might find quaint or strange. Some read or recite prayers, while others perform light chores like mending clothing or tending small fires. Children may be awake for a brief stretch, playing quietly or watching adults, learning the rhythms and expectations of nocturnal life. You watch a small cluster of older children tiptoe down a hallway, sharing whispered jokes while their parents remain vigilant in the adjoining rooms. You can't help but smile at the timelessness of their antics. Human mischief clearly thrives in every era. The segmented sleep pattern also influences dreams. You learn that many households regard the first sleep as more spiritually potent, a period when dreams are vivid and sometimes prophetic. Herbs like mugwort are commonly placed near sleepers to encourage memorable visions, while the second sleep is treated as a time for practical rest, recovery, and preparation for the coming day. Scholars still argue whether these dream interpretations were primarily symbolic or had psychological underpinnings. Observing a mother scribble a note about her child's dream before settling them for the second sleep, you feel the weight of this nightly ritual, a fusion of observation, superstition, and care. The segmented night is not just a personal phenomenon, it is social. You notice neighbors quietly visiting one another, exchanging news or gossip, sharing small meals, or lending assistance with late-night tasks. You follow a man across the lane carrying a basket of firewood, silently passing another household where children are being coaxed into rest. The rhythm of interaction is almost choreographed, a dance of quiet movements that respect the needs of the community. It strikes you how different this is from the modern insistence on isolation during sleep. Here, the night is a shared domain, both intimate and communal. Animals play a subtle but critical role in these nocturnal patterns. Cats patrol houses and barns, mice and rats scurry unseen, and the occasional dog ensures that intruders are detected. You watch a cat lazily circle a hearth before settling, a silent sentinel in the household's nightly defense strategy. The presence of animals, both helpful and intrusive, shapes when and how humans sleep. Scholars still debate whether humans adapted to nocturnal pests or if our sleep patterns were shaped more by environmental factors like daylight and seasonal variation. Observing these interactions, you suspect it was both, a dynamic interplay of adaptation and environment. You pause at a moonlit corner, noticing the interplay of shadow and movement. The second sleep is approaching, and households begin subtle preparations, lighting candles, drawing blankets, and checking that children and elderly are comfortable. There's a serenity in this moment, a quiet acknowledgement that rest will resume soon, and the night will continue its cycle of wakefulness and slumber. The segmented sleep creates natural pauses in life, moments for reflection, observation, and even creativity. You feel a quiet awe at the adaptability of these humans, crafting a life rhythm that works within the constraints of darkness, cold, and daily labor. You watch a small family gather for a brief second-wake meal. Bread is torn into chunks, perhaps accompanied by a bit of cheese or fruit preserved from the harvest. The ritual is simple but deliberate, a shared moment of comfort before returning to bed. Oddly, you notice that these small meals sometimes include ingredients considered unusual or forbidden during the daytime, perhaps linked to superstition or seasonal beliefs. Scholars still argue whether these practices were primarily nutritional, symbolic, or psychological. You feel that it's all three, a testament to the complexity of human adaptation to the night. The streets are largely silent now, punctuated only by occasional footsteps and distant sounds of nocturnal creatures. You notice how communities have learned to coexist with darkness, using subtle illumination from lanterns, hearths, and torches, and balancing movement with the needs of sleepers. There's a choreography to human motion you hadn't appreciated before, a silent, careful flow that ensures rest without complete isolation. You take a deep breath of the crisp night air, inhaling both its calm and its latent energy. You meander toward a quiet courtyard where a family has gathered near the embers of their hearth. They sit together, sharing hushed conversation, adjusting bedding, and preparing themselves for the second sleep. The scene is almost meditative, a ritualistic bridge between active wakefulness and restorative rest. You notice that even minor actions, stoking the embers, folding a blanket, whispering instructions, carry significance, forming a subtle language of care and continuity. The segmented night is not chaotic. It is orchestrated, a testament to human ingenuity and the intimate understanding of our own rhythms. You linger at the edge of the courtyard, feeling the pull of your own drowsiness. The village, the hearths, the careful steps, and whispered instructions all coalesce into a lullaby for your senses. You realize that segmented sleep is not simply about convenience, it is about harmony with life, nature, and community. And in this alignment, even a wandering observer like you finds a quiet sense of belonging, lulled by centuries-old wisdom encoded into the simple, strange, and enduring rhythm of human night. You drift away from the village hearths and straw beds into the pale glow of moonlight, following the quiet pulse of nocturnal life. The streets are almost empty, save for a few wandering figures moving with purpose. Here, superstition laces every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every unexpected sound. Humans 1,000 years ago believed the night was not merely dark but alive with spirits, omens, and forces that could shape your fate while you slept. You can feel their vigilance as if it brushes against your skin, the subtle tension of a world where the unseen mattered as much as the seen. Moonlight dictates behavior. You notice how people avoid walking under certain trees, cross thresholds in particular sequences, or step only with their right foot forward. You overhear hushed whispers about protective charms and the need to avoid unlucky paths. Some families place bowls of water in windows to trap wandering spirits, while others scatter salt across thresholds. Scholars still argue whether these rituals were effective deterrents or purely symbolic. As you watch a woman pause and perform a careful gesture toward her doorway, you sense both a profound faith and a tangible sense of security, the two intertwined in ways that are difficult to separate. Animals, too, respond to the moon. Owls call lazily, their eyes bright in the faint light, while cats move stealthily, their bodies low and deliberate. You note how humans have learned to interpret these nocturnal cues, coordinating movement and rest with the rhythms of nature. Even the smallest rustle can carry meaning. A rat scuttling across a rooftop might signal the need for vigilance, while the gentle croak of a frog might be interpreted as a benign omen. You feel the strange intimacy of living so closely attuned to the night, where instinct, superstition, and observation overlap. You wander past an open window into a home where a family is whispering about dreams. Dream interpretation is a serious business. Children's dreams, in particular, are scrutinized for messages, warnings, or glimpses of the future. A father strokes a child's hair while recounting a dream from the previous night, debating whether it foretells prosperity or danger. Scholars still argue whether dream analysis was largely psychological, symbolic, or merely an entertaining pastime, but you sense that it carries genuine weight here. Sleep is not a passive state. It is a realm of possibility, guidance, and subtle influence on waking life. The smell of herbs clings to the air, stronger near hearths and open windows. Mugwort, wormwood, and other dried plants are burned or placed under pillows to induce dreams or repel spirits. You watch a mother carefully tuck a small bundle beneath her daughter's head, whispering a charm that seems to thread together protection, comfort, and hope. Oddly, you feel a small ripple of calm wash over you simply by observing the ritual. Modern sleep aids might come in the form of pills or devices, but here, intimacy, intention, and scent combine to create a night uniquely attuned to human needs. Even the simplest domestic activities carry significance. You notice an older sibling quietly sweeping the floor, not just for cleanliness but to remove unseen influences that might disturb sleep. Another child arranges the family's shoes in a specific pattern, a habit passed down through generations, believed to prevent misfortune during the night. These small acts, odd as they seem to you, demonstrate a meticulous care for the household's harmony and safety. Scholars still debate whether these superstitions had psychological benefits or were purely cultural constructs. Watching them, you realize it may be both. Structure in a chaotic world. You pause by a small garden patch, where moonlight illuminates the shapes of herbs and vegetables. You can almost hear centuries of nightly movement. Families stepping softly through rows, collecting sprigs of aromatic plants for sleep rituals, or adjusting water bowls and charms to safeguard the night. Even the air feels alive, thick with intention and ritual. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when framed through the lens of survival, protection, and belief. You notice street sounds in a new way. Far-off laughter from another household, the soft clatter of pots, or the subtle creak of doors all contribute to a night alive with social texture. Even the quietest moments are punctuated by these signals, teaching you that darkness was never an empty void. It was a canvas for human activity, superstition, and imagination. You realize that sleep in this world is as much about social cohesion and psychological comfort as it is about rest. A curious, almost whimsical habit catches your attention. Some villagers leave small tokens of food or trinkets outside their doors, offerings to spirits or protectors of the night. You watch a child place a tiny morsel by a doorstep, whispering a phrase that you can't quite catch. Scholars still argue whether these practices had religious significance or were primarily a form of early behavioral training, but either way, they create a bridge between the mundane and the mystical, shaping the rhythm of life after sunset. The interplay of light and shadow enhances these rituals. Lanterns glow faintly against walls, casting intricate patterns that shift with the flame. You notice how humans adjust their movements to avoid harsh illumination, relying on the gentle, flickering glow to guide them. Even seemingly trivial details, how a lantern is hung, where shadows fall, carry meaning, creating a night carefully curated for protection, introspection, and continuity. You wander into a small courtyard where neighbors have gathered, sharing whispered stories and soft laughter. The moon bathes the stone in silver light, and you sense that these moments of quiet communion are essential to nocturnal life. Social bonds are strengthened during these intervals, and you notice that sleep is not just an individual act but a collective one, influenced by the behaviors, beliefs, and presence of others. You marvel at the delicate choreography, where superstition, routine, and human connection intersect. Herbs, dreams, and vigilant observation weave together into a tapestry of nightly security and calm. The moon, high above, seems to oversee this intricate dance, influencing actions, fears, and the timing of rest. Even as an observer, you feel the subtle pull of these rhythms, the hypnotic cadence of a night carefully structured to balance uncertainty and comfort. Finally, you step back into the cool open air, taking in the quiet brilliance of moonlit rooftops and streets. You realize that superstition and ritual are not arbitrary, they are guides, frameworks allowing humans to navigate the night safely and meaningfully. Even the most peculiar practices, charms, dream interpretations, and moonlit gestures, serve a purpose in a world without artificial light or modern security. You feel a deep respect for these ancient sleepers, who navigated darkness with ingenuity, attentiveness, and a blend of practicality and belief. You wander further, leaving the village behind, stepping into the edge of the surrounding forests, where night deepens and the moonlight plays tricks on the eyes. Shadows stretch long across roots and rocks, creating shapes that seem almost alive. You feel your pulse quicken slightly. This is the realm where superstition is strongest, where humans 1,000 years ago believed spirits, witches, and other nocturnal beings prowled. You notice that even the most courageous adults carry charms or sticks, a kind of practical reassurance against threats both real and imagined. Scholars still argue whether such protective habits were primarily born of fear or ritualistic habit, but from where you stand, they feel both instinctual and deeply human. You pause to listen. The forest hums quietly. Owls hoot, leaves rustle, small animals scurry unseen. You can almost hear centuries of footsteps, the careful movements of villagers fetching late-night firewood, hunters returning home, or solitary souls performing midnight prayers. Some of these footsteps, you imagine, were hurried, almost furtive, meant to avoid drawing attention from both human and supernatural observers. You realize that humans in this period were intimately aware of their environment, blending observation, superstition, and instinct in ways that shaped their sleep and nighttime routines. Herbs remain a consistent thread, even here at the forest's edge. You spot bundles of dried plants tied with string, some hanging from branches, others placed near homes or along paths. Mugwort and rue, you recall, were used for dream enhancement and protection. You watch a villager adjust a small sprig tied near a doorway, whispering a quiet incantation. Oddly, you feel a sense of reassurance yourself. These rituals, however strange, are both methodical and comforting, a clear example of how humans have long sought agency over sleep and safety. The idea of sleep as a communal act persists even here. Small clusters of villagers share fires, blankets, and stories, their presence reinforcing a sense of security. You observe a group huddled near a fire, some dozing intermittently, others maintaining vigilance. You realize that rest is never purely solitary. Humans rely on each other for warmth, protection, and psychological comfort. Scholars still argue whether these communal arrangements were primarily for survival or social cohesion, but standing there, you sense it was both. The rhythm of human night is shaped as much by community as by biology. You come across an unusual sleeping practice. Some individuals maintain a partial wakefulness during the night, sitting propped against trees or fences while others sleep fully. This seems odd now, but you notice its logic. Rest is staggered to ensure constant observation and safety. You imagine a parent watching over children, a guard at a gate, or a family member listening for predators. Sleep is flexible, adapted to circumstance, and intimately tied to vigilance. You feel a subtle admiration for the ingenuity, and you can't help but think, you probably wouldn't survive the night here without such strategies. Oddities abound even in the simplest routines. You notice a man adjusting his blanket repeatedly, muttering softly, perhaps performing a personal charm or ritual. Some families maintain nighttime check-ins, walking quietly among sleeping members to ensure comfort, warmth, and protection. Scholars still debate the prevalence of such practices, but your observation suggests they were widespread. These habits underscore a central truth. Sleep was never just physiological, it was cultural, social, and often deeply spiritual. Animals continue to play a crucial role. Cats patrol vigilantly, dogs lie alert near paths, and livestock occasionally stir, signaling distant movements. You watch a small cat creep silently among the underbrush, its alert eyes reflecting torchlight. Humans seem to coordinate their sleep patterns with these creatures, an early symbiosis of vigilance and comfort. Even pests like mice are tolerated strategically, their movements accounted for in sleeping arrangements and protective rituals. You marvel at how intricately humans adapted to the nocturnal world, blending observation, superstition, and practicality. You pause by a faintly glowing lantern, noticing another curious habit: nighttime storytelling. Villagers gather in small circles, sharing tales of spirits, monsters, or strange dreams. You feel the rhythm of these stories, punctuated by gasps, whispers, and laughter. These narratives serve multiple purposes: entertainment, education, cautionary guidance, and even preparation for sleep. They are as much a part of nocturnal life as straw beds or firelight. Scholars still argue whether such storytelling primarily shaped moral behavior, reinforced social norms, or simply helped humans cope with fear, but you sense all three are true. The forest edge brings with it a strange intimacy. Moonlight reflects on leaves, the wind stirs faint aromas of damp earth and herbs, and every sound feels magnified. Sleep, you realize, is always negotiated here, between fear and security, vigilance and rest, myth and reality. You catch sight of a family settling near a fire, arranging blankets and cushions, their bodies forming an irregular circle of warmth and protection. The choreography of sleep is deliberate, an intricate weave of care and caution that has persisted for generations. You notice that small personal rituals persist even in this semi-wild environment. A mother sprinkles herbs near the edge of a fire, a child tucks a small talisman under a pillow, a man adjusts his cloak before sitting down. Odd as they seem, these practices are practical too. They repel insects, retain warmth, and signal intentionality, transforming the night from a chaotic wilderness into a space that can be lived in, even temporarily rested in. Scholars still debate the origin of such rituals: mystical, practical, or psychological. Watching them, you feel they are all three, intertwined in ways that make perfect sense in context. The night's sounds shift gradually. A distant owl gives a long, drawn-out hoot, a dog barks faintly, and a small brook trickles nearby. You notice that the forest's nocturnal symphony is interwoven with human activity: fires crackling, whispered instructions, footsteps on leaf-strewn paths. Sleep is not isolated here. It is a negotiated state, a balance struck between alertness and surrender, a compromise between survival and the human need for rest. You watch the families settle, bodies curling close, fires dimming slightly, lanterns placed strategically for comfort and security. Herbs continue to smoke gently, animals patrol, and the wind whispers softly through the trees. There is a profound serenity here, a quiet order amid what might seem chaotic to outsiders. You understand that humans, even 1,000 years ago, have mastered the night in ways both strange and familiar, a combination of observation, ritual, communal care, and deep awareness of their environment. Finally, you take a step back into the moonlit clearing, inhaling the crisp, fragrant air. The forest and village blend into one nocturnal rhythm, a living, breathing network of rest, vigilance, and belief. Sleep is not a single state. It is an orchestrated performance, a living practice, shaped by biology, superstition, and necessity. You feel yourself relaxing, sensing the cadence of centuries-old night practices as if they have seeped into your own body, whispering that humans have always found ways to carve safety and rest from the dark. You wander deeper into the nocturnal world, moving from open courtyards and forest edges to the quieter interiors of dwellings tucked along narrow lanes. The soft flicker of candlelight casts long shadows on uneven walls, and the faint smell of herbs mingles with the ever-present aroma of smoke from hearths. You notice the intimate nature of nighttime life inside these homes. People move slowly, deliberately, attuned to the rhythms of others who sleep, eat, or perform minor chores. There is a distinct choreography to their night, each action purposeful, every motion considerate of neighbors, family, and self. In one room, you observe a peculiar habit. Several family members sleep in shifts. A father lies partially upright against a pile of blankets, a lantern nearby illuminating his face, while children curl around a mat on the floor. The mother walks quietly between them, adjusting the blankets, murmuring soothing words, occasionally pausing to sprinkle herbs near pillows. You sense that sleep here is a communal responsibility, an ongoing negotiation between rest and vigilance. Scholars still argue whether segmented, shift-based sleep arose primarily from practical necessity or social convention, but you can't help but notice its elegance. Rest is distributed, care is maintained, and the household functions as a single organism. You notice the strange interplay between superstition and practicality. Small charms hang above beds, bowls of water glint in candlelight, and certain herbs are deliberately placed near sleepers. A young girl adjusts her doll to face the doorway, murmuring a quiet reassurance. Odd as these practices may seem, they serve psychological, protective, and even educational purposes. Sleep is not merely a passive state, it is active, ritualized, and structured, reflecting centuries of accumulated wisdom about safety, comfort, and human psychology. Outside, you hear the low murmur of distant voices, perhaps neighbors checking on each other or sharing whispered stories. These nocturnal social interactions are subtle but essential. Even brief exchanges strengthen community bonds, reinforce security, and provide reassurance during the hours of darkness. You notice a small child standing at a doorway, waving to a neighbor and then retreating to bed, the gesture a ritualized acknowledgement of shared vigilance. Scholars still debate how widespread these social patterns were, but observing them firsthand, you feel the rhythms of care and connection embedded deeply in nightly life. A few doors down, you spot a man performing what seems to be an elaborate personal ritual. He lights a small lamp, arranges a few herbs carefully, and mutters softly under his breath. You realize that these habits, while idiosyncratic, have dual purposes. They calm the mind and reinforce a sense of control over the night. Sleep is never entirely passive, it is actively cultivated. These practices may seem quaint or eccentric, but they are rooted in observation, superstition, and the human need to impose order on darkness. The sensory landscape of nighttime homes is vivid. You notice the flicker of candlelight across walls, the warmth of the hearth radiating gently, and the faint crackle of fires maintained in shifts. The smell of herbs, lavender, wormwood, and chamomile, mingles with the scent of wool, straw, and cooking smoke. Each household creates its own nocturnal ecosystem, blending practical comforts with ritualized gestures to cultivate safety, relaxation, and preparedness. Scholars still argue whether the psychological effects of such sensory arrangements were intentional or incidental, but you can feel the impact clearly. The environment encourages calm, focus, and ultimately, sleep. Children are particularly fascinating to watch during these night hours. Some nap in short intervals, while others play quietly, learn household routines, or participate in light chores. Sleep education, you realize, is subtle but intentional. The youngest members of the household absorb habits, rituals, and the rhythms of segmented rest as part of their daily lives. Some children even develop preferences for particular sleeping arrangements, positions, or rituals, a mix of inherited practice and personal comfort. Oddly, you feel a sense of nostalgia witnessing these behaviors. They echo modern bedtime habits but are integrated seamlessly into daily survival. The night is punctuated by odd, almost theatrical habits. Some villagers rise briefly to check fires, replenish wood, or inspect boundaries. A small dog may patrol the room, while a cat curls nearby, alert yet serene. Even the simplest domestic acts are ritualized. Sweeping floors, adjusting straw bedding, or moving small objects with care. These actions, while seemingly mundane, are entwined with protection, superstition, and psychological reassurance. Sleep, you understand, is both biological and cultural, a negotiation between rest, vigilance, and ritual. You notice that dreams are treated with significant attention. Families record or discuss dreams, interpreting omens, moral lessons, or practical advice. Children's dreams receive particular focus, often with herbs or charms deployed to ensure good dreams. Scholars still argue whether dream interpretation was primarily symbolic, instructive, or psychological, but observing these practices, you feel their genuine importance. The human mind, even then, is guided by narrative, ritual, and the subtle interplay between imagination and reality. Some families maintain extraordinary flexibility in sleep timing. They nap during brief daylight gaps, rest in shifts at night, or adjust positions and routines in response to temperature, pests, or household events. These variations create a complex yet coherent sleep ecology, adaptive to environmental, social, and spiritual demands. You feel impressed by the ingenuity. Humans a millennium ago were finely attuned to their circadian rhythms, local ecology, and community needs in ways that modern urban dwellers rarely experience. The interplay of superstition and practical care continues to captivate you. Protective gestures, charms, and whispered phrases mingle seamlessly with tending fires, arranging bedding, and distributing warmth. Sleep is both guarded and cultivated, a state of active preparation as much as passive rest. Oddly, you feel your own body relaxing in response to these centuries-old rhythms, sensing a connection across time, a quiet acknowledgement that humans have long shaped the night to suit both mind and body. You pause near an alcove, observing a small family cluster. A parent adjusts a child's blanket, a sibling leans against a wall reading by flickering light, and a cat circulates the perimeter. The room is alive yet calm, structured yet flexible. Sleep is not a single act, it is an orchestrated series of gestures, routines, and attentiveness. Scholars still debate the universality of these domestic rhythms, but witnessing them now, you sense their coherence and necessity. Finally, you settle into the shadowed corner of the room, letting the dim candlelight wash over you. The smells, the flicker, the hushed voices, the careful movements, all combine into a tactile lullaby, a living map of nocturnal life. You feel the elegance of these sleeping arrangements, the wisdom embedded in every ritual, and the subtle choreography that ensures both rest and vigilance. Across centuries, humans have mastered the night through observation, adaptation, and imagination, and now, quietly, you become a part of that continuum. You slip out into the open night again, this time wandering toward the outskirts of the settlement where the fields stretch under the silver glow of the moon. The air is cooler here, scented faintly with damp earth and the sharp aroma of harvested grain. Nighttime routines extend beyond the home. The fields, barns, and storerooms are active spaces long after the sun has disappeared. You notice that sleep is not confined to bedrooms, it is a flexible state, intertwined with labor, necessity, and preparation for the day ahead. Scholars still argue whether such nocturnal activity was widespread or limited to specific regions and professions, but the evidence before you suggests a quiet ubiquity. Humans adapt to night, whether through vigilance, ritual, or work. A barn door creaks softly as you approach, revealing a scene both ordinary and strange. Farmers and their families move quietly among animals, checking the night's water supply, adjusting bedding, or ensuring that livestock remain calm. You notice the way some even settle temporarily near the animals for brief naps, their bodies curled on straw, one eye open for disturbances. Sleep here is pragmatic. Segmented, intermittent, and attentive, a far cry from modern notions of uninterrupted rest. Yet there's a rhythm to it, a sense that humans have internalized a natural cadence of work and sleep that aligns with environmental cues and seasonal cycles. You spot a peculiar habit. Some farmhands sprinkle herbs or ash across the ground in animal enclosures. The explanation is practical, yes, perhaps to deter pests or mask scent, but there is also superstition. The belief that the right mixture wards off evil spirits or ensures productivity in the morning lingers in the air. Scholars still debate the origin and efficacy of these practices, but observing them firsthand, you understand their dual function, utility and psychological reassurance. Humans long ago wove superstition seamlessly into daily life, especially when the stakes, safety, food, livelihood, were high. A sudden gust of wind rustles the fields, making the tall stalks of grain sway like waves. You notice the meticulous care with which villagers secure doors, stack hay, and close windows, all while maintaining the potential for sleep. Oddly, there is almost an elegance in their movements, a choreography of labor and rest, superstition and observation. Sleep is not merely a physiological state here, it is a carefully negotiated balance between vigilance and surrender, comfort and caution. You can almost hear scholars arguing over whether this duality arose from survival necessity or cultural inheritance, but the answer is clearly intertwined. Humans adapted instinctively, and tradition encoded those adaptations into habit. Small fires burn at intervals along the fields, casting pools of warm light. Villagers gather briefly around these flames, sharing whispered words or performing small tasks, before returning to their separate duties. Some sip herbal infusions designed to encourage restful sleep after the brief periods of activity. The odd, almost ceremonial nature of these drinks strikes you. They are practical, yes, but also comforting, creating a sense of control over the night's unknowns. You notice the contrast between active engagement and repose, a duality that seems to define nocturnal life in these agrarian communities. You approach a small storage shed, where a woman carefully arranges grains in baskets. She pauses to murmur softly, sprinkling a few herbs atop the piles. Odd as it seems, the ritual has a clear logic. It protects the harvest, provides psychological reassurance, and marks her presence as a caretaker in the household's nocturnal ecosystem. You reflect that many habits we might dismiss as quaint were, in fact, highly functional adaptations. Sleep and wakefulness are interwoven with labor, superstition, and mindfulness, creating a world where the night is never empty, only differently alive. Animals are both participants and indicators in these nocturnal rhythms. Horses shift their weight and stamp lightly on the ground, goats nuzzle in their pens, and the occasional owl sweeps silently overhead. Humans have learned to interpret these cues. A restless animal may signal danger, weather change, or the presence of nocturnal predators. You notice a man pausing to observe his horse, adjusting bedding and murmuring reassurance. Sleep is flexible and context-dependent. It adapts to the natural rhythms of the environment and the needs of dependent creatures. Scholars still debate how deeply these practices shaped human circadian patterns, but the interplay is undeniable. You stumble upon a truly curious practice. Some families maintain nighttime patrols, even within the fields. Individuals rise for brief stretches, moving silently, observing boundaries, and occasionally whispering short prayers. The idea seems almost theatrical, yet it's profoundly practical. Vigilance is shared, and sleep is staggered to minimize risk. The pattern is repeated in many households, showing a deep cultural memory of danger and survival. Scholars still question whether this was universal or situational, but here, under the open sky, it feels like a natural extension of life. Moonlight catches the edge of a small pond nearby, and you notice yet another odd habit. Villagers often use the reflective surface to check on the night, observing movement, lighting small fires, or confirming the positions of animals. The reflection seems to serve both practical and symbolic purposes, an early form of monitoring and reassurance. Oddly, you feel a quiet kinship with these people, centuries removed, yet sharing a desire to understand and mitigate risk while allowing for rest. You pause to watch a small family seated near a fire, their faces illuminated gently. Children nap intermittently on mats, while adults perform small tasks or prepare snacks for the coming second sleep. There is a quiet beauty in this orchestration, the mix of work, vigilance, and intermittent rest. Scholars still debate the evolutionary origins of these staggered sleep patterns, but here, under the stars, the reasoning is clear. Humans have long intertwined labor, ritual, and rest into a single, coherent nocturnal experience. You notice that herbs continue to play a subtle but significant role. Burned on fires or placed near sleepers, they serve as both practical insect deterrents and instruments of psychological comfort. Odd, perhaps, but effective. Dream patterns, too, are carefully observed. A restless child may be soothed with a sprig of mugwort, a small charm, or gentle touch. You feel the intricate web of sensory cues, rituals, and social structures, the ancient blueprint for balanced nighttime life. The night's sounds, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, soft murmurs, meld into a calming rhythm. Even under the open sky, humans have cultivated a nocturnal ecosystem, a careful balance of observation, superstition, community, and rest. The orchestration of sleep, vigilance, and ritual continues seamlessly, showing a nuanced understanding of human biology and the demands of the environment. You realize that the night is alive not only with creatures and shadows but with practices that ensure safety, comfort, and continuity. Finally, you step back from the fields, inhaling the crisp night air, tinged with herbs and soil. Sleep here is not a singular state. It is a dynamic interplay between rest, observation, superstition, and survival. Humans have mastered the night through adaptation, community, and ritual, creating a nocturnal world that is safe, functional, and surprisingly intimate. You feel the cadence of these patterns ripple through you, a quiet echo of human ingenuity that spans centuries, reminding you that even in darkness, life is structured, deliberate, and connected. Word count: 1993. You move from the open fields back toward the winding lanes that lead to the denser parts of the village, where houses cluster together and smoke drifts lazily from chimneys. The moonlight is softer here, filtered by roof tiles and tree branches, creating an interplay of shadow and glow that seems almost alive. You notice how humans navigate this nocturnal environment. Steps deliberate, voices hushed, gestures measured. Every movement is attuned to both practicality and superstition, a silent dance that has been rehearsed for generations. Scholars still argue whether this intricate choreography arose out of necessity, belief, or a combination of both, but to observe it firsthand is to appreciate its elegance and precision. Inside a modest home, you notice the careful positioning of sleeping arrangements. Mats and blankets are aligned with precision, some elevated slightly, others closer to hearth warmth. Certain family members sleep in specific orientations, head toward the east, feet to the west, following inherited traditions. You sense that these habits are both symbolic and practical. They reassure the mind, regulate body temperature, and maintain harmony within the household. Oddly, the rituals feel as natural as breathing, an invisible current guiding behavior and thought. Herbs continue to play a starring role. Bundles of dried chamomile, lavender, and mugwort hang from beams or rest atop pillows. A mother quietly adjusts a sprig near her child, murmuring an incantation designed to protect dreams. These small acts are fascinating in their dual purpose: practical deterrent against pests and symbolic safeguard against unseen forces. Scholars still debate the origin of these practices, whether they are primarily cultural, spiritual, or psychological, but standing here, you feel their effect regardless. A subtle calm, a sense of control over the night. You catch sight of an unusual nighttime activity. Some families divide sleep into two distinct periods, separated by an interval of quiet work, reflection, or small tasks. This segmented sleep pattern allows for both rest and vigilance. You notice a father sitting quietly, repairing a basket by lantern light, while others slumber around him. The practice is strange to your modern sensibilities, yet oddly logical. Sleep is not a singular, uninterrupted state. It is flexible, structured around human needs and environmental demands. Scholars still argue whether this pattern is a product of biological rhythms or purely social adaptation, but witnessing it feels revelatory. Outside, the sounds of the village at night create a subtle symphony. The faint clatter of a roof tile, distant laughter, the occasional cough, all punctuate the night without breaking its rhythm. Even these small noises are part of the nocturnal ecosystem. Humans interpret them, respond to them, and incorporate them into the structure of rest. You notice a young boy sitting by a doorway, whispering a story to a sibling before curling back into blankets. These soft, human sounds are woven into the fabric of night, creating a sense of safety, continuity, and intimacy. A curious practice catches your attention. Families often leave small tokens of food near doorways or on windowsills. These offerings, meant for spirits or guardians, are as much about protection as they are about tradition. You watch a child carefully place a piece of bread, muttering a phrase barely audible. Scholars still debate whether these gestures have any spiritual efficacy, but their psychological impact is undeniable. They provide reassurance, structure, and a sense of agency in a world that can feel unpredictable after dark. Animals continue their quiet orchestration. Cats move stealthily across rooftops, dogs patrol boundaries, and chickens cluck softly in their coops. Humans adjust their routines around these animals, interpreting their behaviors as warnings or signals. You see a man pause to watch his dog, noting its alert posture before returning to his own slumber. Sleep is a negotiation with the living environment, a blend of instinct, observation, and precaution that stretches across species. Dreams remain a focal point of nightly life. Families discuss them openly, interpreting symbols, predicting events, or offering guidance. You watch a group of children whisper about a shared dream, their voices barely above a murmur. Herbs are sprinkled, talismans adjusted, and soft words spoken, all to encourage rest and ensure favorable dreams. Scholars still argue whether these practices are primarily symbolic, instructional, or psychological, but their persistence underscores humanity's enduring fascination with the unconscious mind. You notice another odd habit. Some households employ partial wakefulness, with one adult remaining alert while others sleep. This staggered vigilance ensures safety while maintaining communal rest. A woman watches quietly from a window, her gaze sweeping across the street as her children slumber inside. Sleep here is a strategic activity, intertwined with protection, care, and ritual. It is not simply a personal act but a communal responsibility, a dynamic state shaped by observation and necessity. The interplay of light and shadow continues to shape behavior. Candle flames flicker gently, casting shifting patterns on walls and ceilings. Humans instinctively adjust their positions, movements, and gestures according to these patterns, finding both comfort and guidance in the ambient glow. You notice how even minor details, how a lantern is hung or where a blanket is draped, carry layers of meaning, creating a night that is at once protective, ritualized, and aesthetically comforting. Soft, almost imperceptible rituals permeate the night. Sweeping floors, adjusting bedding, arranging small household items, all are performed quietly yet deliberately. These gestures are simultaneously practical and symbolic, reinforcing order and ensuring comfort. Sleep becomes a multi-layered experience, a combination of rest, vigilance, superstition, and human care that has persisted across generations. Scholars still debate the universality of such rituals, but in this moment, they feel entirely coherent and natural. You pause near a hearth, watching a small fire's glow reflect off the walls. A family sits around it, sharing whispered words, checking on sleepers, and adjusting blankets. Even in the darkness, there is a palpable sense of order and intentionality. Sleep is not simply surrendered to the body, it is cultivated, structured, and guided by a web of routines, rituals, and observation. Finally, you step back into the stillness of the village lane. Moonlight, shadows, and flickering candlelight blend into a delicate nocturnal tapestry. The night is alive with both movement and stillness, ritual and instinct, superstition and practicality. You feel a subtle connection to these ancient sleepers, their practices echoing across centuries. Sleep, you realize, has always been more than biology, it is social, psychological, and deeply human. The village's nocturnal rhythms pulse quietly, inviting both participation and reflection, a timeless testament to human ingenuity and care. You leave the clustered homes behind and wander toward the riverbank, where the moonlight dances on the water's surface and the night air carries a soft, cool mist. The river hums a constant, gentle lullaby, punctuated by the occasional splash of a fish or the distant cry of a waterbird. Humans have long treated rivers as both life sources and spiritual entities, and their nocturnal practices reflect this reverence. You notice villagers moving quietly along the banks, tending small nets, checking traps, or performing brief rituals. Sleep, in this environment, is intricately intertwined with the rhythms of water, wildlife, and superstition. Scholars still debate whether proximity to water influenced specific sleep behaviors, but the evidence here suggests an undeniable connection. A curious habit emerges among these riverside dwellers: partial night vigils. One person may stay awake, watching the water, while others rest nearby on mats or under simple shelters. You notice a man adjusting a lantern's position, ensuring that shadows do not obscure the path. Sleep here is staggered, a negotiated state of shared vigilance, balancing rest with the constant need for safety and preparedness. Oddly, you feel the tension and calm coexisting in the same breath, a rhythm of night that is both deliberate and instinctive. Herbs and charms maintain their silent presence. Small bundles of lavender, mugwort, and rue hang from rafters, suspended from boats, or tucked into bedding. They serve multiple functions: insect deterrents, dream aids, and protective talismans. You observe a woman gently rubbing a sprig of mugwort along a child's pillow, murmuring a protective phrase under her breath. Scholars still argue whether these practices had primarily psychological or spiritual efficacy, but you notice the tangible sense of calm they produce. The ritual itself becomes a form of care, an active preparation for the vulnerable state of sleep. Along the riverbank, you encounter another oddity: nighttime washing or cleansing rituals. Some villagers bathe briefly or splash water over hands and faces before bed, a practice believed to purify the body and spirit. You watch a young girl dip her hands into the river and wipe them across her face, a quiet, deliberate act. Scholars still debate whether this practice was motivated by hygiene, superstition, or both, but its calming effect is palpable. You feel the subtle transfer of centuries-old practices, a continuity of care and mindfulness that transcends time. The nocturnal environment here is alive in ways distinct from the village interior. Water reflects light in unpredictable patterns, animals move along hidden paths, and the occasional breeze disturbs reeds and grasses. Humans adapt fluidly. their movements are cautious, their conversations hushed, their gestures deliberate. You notice a man pausing to listen, adjusting his position slightly, eyes flicking toward the darkened water. Sleep in this context is relational, not merely an individual act but a negotiated equilibrium with the environment. Dream practices are alive and subtle in these riverside households. Families discuss visions in hushed tones, often associating dreams with water spirits, omens, or forthcoming events. A child whispers about a dream of a shining fish, and an elder interprets it as a sign of good fortune. Odd as it seems, the interpretation is part of a structured, communal approach to sleep in the subconscious. Scholars still debate the influence of such dream interpretation on decision making, but you sense its psychological weight. It structures thought, reduces anxiety, and cultivates attentive awareness of both inner and outer worlds. You pause to observe a small fire near the river's edge, its reflection quivering across the water. A family sits close, blankets pulled around them, the soft crackle of flames mingling with the gentle murmur of the river. Children drift in and out of light sleep while adults tend chores or maintain vigilance. Even the simplest tasks, stirring a pot, adjusting bedding, maintaining the fire, carry significance. They ensure safety, comfort, and continuity of communal rhythm. Sleep is an orchestrated performance, woven into daily life rather than isolated from it. Animals continue to participate actively in nocturnal life. A dog rests alertly near the fire, cats slip silently along the bank, and fish occasionally disturb the water's surface. Humans interpret these behaviors carefully. A restless dog may signal a predator or stranger, while subtle animal movements dictate timing, positioning, and vigilance. Sleep is adaptive, attuned to the natural world in a way modern urban dwellers rarely experience. Oddly, you feel a heightened awareness, a subtle synchrony with creatures that share the night. Small offerings along the riverbank catch your eye. Tiny pieces of bread, grain, or herbs are left near specific rocks or plants, gestures of appeasement to spirits or forces associated with water. You watch a child lay a small morsel on a flat stone, whispering a phrase too soft to hear. Scholars still argue whether these offerings had spiritual efficacy or served as psychological reinforcement, but you feel the significance. Humans assert a sense of control, continuity, and safety through deliberate acts, bridging the seen and unseen worlds. The night deepens and becomes quieter, punctuated by gentle water lapping, rustling reeds, and distant owl calls. You notice that even brief human movements are carefully calibrated, steps measured, whispers controlled, lanterns angled just so. The environment itself dictates patterns of rest and wakefulness, shaping the night with subtle authority. Sleep is flexible, communal, and deeply attuned to surroundings. Scholars still debate the universality of these practices, but the patterns here are coherent, deliberate, and resonant with logic and care. Finally, you take a slow step back from the river, inhaling the night air filled with the scent of herbs, water, and damp earth. The nocturnal world here is alive with ritual, observation, and adaptation. Sleep, you realize, is far from a passive state. It is cultivated, protected, and deeply embedded in the rhythms of human and environmental life. The river murmurs its timeless lullaby, a gentle reminder that humans have long shaped their nights, negotiating darkness with skill, imagination, and care. You feel a sense of serenity wash over you, the cadence of centuries-old practices echoing softly in your mind, reassuring and profound. You leave the riverbank behind and make your way toward the edge of the forest, where moonlight pierces through gaps in the trees, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air is cooler, the sense of moss and damp leaves more pronounced, and the quiet is broken only by the occasional rustle of a nocturnal creature. Humans 1,000 years ago treated forests as both resource and mystery, and their nighttime behaviors reflect that delicate balance. You notice villagers moving with careful awareness, mindful of roots, uneven ground, and shadows that seem to move on their own. Sleep here is not an isolated state. It is negotiated with the environment, with animals, and with superstition. Scholars still debate whether forest vigilance was primarily practical or ritualistic, but your observation suggests it was a seamless combination of both. Near a cluster of trees, you spot a peculiar habit: partial night watches. One person sits alert against a tree trunk while others sleep on mats or simple bedding nearby. Lanterns flicker, casting long, dancing shadows across leaves and branches. The interplay of light and dark shapes movements, thoughts, and even the timing of sleep. Oddly, you feel a sense of calm observing this, a reminder that humans, even when awake, can create a structured rhythm that allows others to rest safely. Sleep is actively managed, a dynamic state blending vigilance and relaxation. Herbs continue to play an essential role in nocturnal life. You notice bundles of mugwort, sage, and chamomile tucked into tree hollows or tied to branches near sleeping areas. Their purposes are multifaceted: repelling insects, encouraging pleasant dreams, and warding off evil spirits. A woman whispers softly as she adjusts a sprig near her child's bedding, performing a gesture that is both protective and ritualistic. Scholars still argue whether these practices were primarily symbolic or functional, but their effect on calm, alert sleep is clear. The line between superstition and practical knowledge blurs seamlessly here. You notice another intriguing habit: segmented sleep, often punctuated by forest chores or reflection. One man rises from a simple bedroll to tend a small fire, while a child stirs to feed animals nearby. Even the act of returning to sleep is ritualized: blankets adjusted, herbs sprinkled, small prayers whispered. Sleep is not a single state but a series of transitions, a balance between rest and environmental engagement. Scholars still debate whether this was a natural circadian rhythm or a socially constructed habit, yet observing it, you understand the profound logic. The forest is alive with sound. Leaves rustle, distant animals call softly, and occasional branches snap under unseen weight. Humans respond with acute awareness. Steps are measured, conversations hushed, and attention focused. A family listens closely to subtle cues: the shift of a wind gust, the distant cry of a fox, to adjust their vigilance and sleep positions. Sleep becomes a negotiation with nature, a state finely attuned to external rhythms. Oddly, you feel your own senses heighten in response, a subtle echo of centuries-old instincts. Dreams are woven into forest life in curious ways. Villagers share nighttime visions by firelight, interpreting them as signs of forthcoming weather, warnings, or blessings. You see a small child recounting a dream of glowing insects, and an elder nodding thoughtfully, providing guidance. Oddly, the dream sharing is both educational and protective. It teaches the young, reassures the anxious, and fosters a communal understanding of the night's potential dangers. Scholars still debate the efficacy of dream rituals, but the act itself strengthens vigilance and social cohesion. Animals play an active role in nocturnal forest routines. Cats patrol silently, dogs remain alert, and the occasional owl sweeps overhead. You notice a man pausing to observe a dog's posture, interpreting subtle cues before returning to sleep. Sleep is adaptive here, closely tied to the behavior of other creatures. Oddly, this interaction creates a quiet partnership. Humans depend on animals for alerts, while animals gain comfort from human presence. The nocturnal ecosystem is co-created, a dynamic blend of observation, care, and shared vigilance. Small rituals pervade even the simplest tasks. Sweeping fallen leaves, arranging bedding, or tending fires, all are performed quietly, with deliberate gestures. These acts are practical and symbolic simultaneously, reinforcing safety and structure. Sleep is a multi-layered experience: physical rest interlaced with attentiveness, ritual, and environmental engagement. Scholars still argue about the universality of these nocturnal practices, but standing here, you feel their coherence and logic. You notice an unusual habit. Some villagers leave small food offerings near tree roots or hollows, believed to appease spirits or forest guardians. A child places a tiny piece of bread, muttering softly. Scholars still debate whether these gestures had spiritual efficacy, but their psychological and social effects are clear: reassurance, ritualized care, and a sense of control over otherwise unpredictable conditions. You realize that such habits persist across centuries, providing insight into human ingenuity in structuring sleep and protection. The forest's nocturnal soundscape creates a soothing rhythm. Rustling leaves, distant calls, and occasional water drips merge into a quiet symphony. Every human movement is calibrated: soft footsteps, gentle whispers, careful handling of tools. Sleep is not a passive retreat but an actively managed process, adapted to environmental, social, and spiritual needs. You feel a subtle resonance with these practices, a continuity that stretches back centuries. Finally, you step into a small clearing, observing a family settled around a modest fire. Mats are arranged carefully, blankets tucked to retain warmth, and herbs waft faintly in the air. Adults remain partially alert while children drift into sleep, creating a dynamic but harmonious nocturnal ecosystem. The night is orchestrated, blending vigilance, ritual, and rest into a coherent whole. You feel the rhythm of centuries-old practices seep into your own body, a quiet reminder of human resilience and ingenuity. As you take a last slow breath of the cool forest air, you realize that sleep here is not simply a physiological necessity, it is a crafted experience, entwined with superstition, observation, community, and care. The night is alive with intention, a living testament to how humans have historically mastered darkness, creating safety and comfort from the shadows. You feel a deep, calming connection to those who walked these paths before, their nocturnal wisdom echoing softly in the stillness around you. You step out of the forest and find yourself at the edge of a small hill overlooking the village below. The soft glow of candlelight flickers through windows, mingling with the silver wash of moonlight over rooftops and streets. From this vantage, the village appears both tranquil and alive, a patchwork of quiet movement and restful stillness. Humans 1,000 years ago had an acute awareness of light, shadow, and time, and their sleep patterns reflect this. You notice people navigating nocturnal spaces carefully, aware of both neighbors and environmental hazards. Scholars still argue whether these nocturnal routines were largely instinctual or socially enforced, but watching them, the patterns feel deliberate and intuitive. Near the hill's base, you spot a family engaged in an unusual habit, partial night vigils. One adult remains alert while others sleep on mats or blankets laid outside. Lanterns sway gently in the breeze, casting elongated shadows across stone walls and earthen paths. Sleep is clearly not a singular, uninterrupted state, it is staggered, managed, and socially coordinated. Oddly, you feel a strange calm witnessing this careful balance between rest and alertness, the quiet rhythm of care flowing seamlessly from person to person. Herbs and small charms are everywhere, signaling a continuing intersection of superstition and practicality. Bundles of lavender, chamomile, and rosemary hang from rafters or near sleeping mats. You notice a mother gently brushing a sprig across her child's hair, whispering softly. Scholars still debate whether these gestures were primarily protective, psychological, or symbolic, but their calming effect is palpable. Sleep is actively cultivated, framed by ritual, and supported by centuries of inherited knowledge. You notice segmented sleep patterns repeated here, short periods of rest punctuated by activity. One man rises to tend the fire, another adjusts a child's blankets, while a third quietly sweeps the path. The sequence is repeated across households, forming a subtle but pervasive nocturnal choreography. Sleep is a flexible state, responding dynamically to social, environmental, and safety demands. Scholars still argue whether these practices shape circadian rhythms biologically, but observing them, the rationale is evident. Humans orchestrate rest in concert with the world around them. Children are particularly interesting in these nighttime practices. Some drift in and out of short naps, while others participate in quiet chores or small rituals. You watch a girl sprinkle herbs on a mat, mimicking her mother's gestures. Even at a young age, children learn that sleep is structured, ritualized, and interwoven with communal safety. Oddly, this resembles modern bedtime routines, but integrated seamlessly into survival strategies rather than convenience. You catch sight of a quirky habit, leaving small food offerings near doorways, hearths, or garden edges. Pieces of bread, grains, or fruit are placed carefully, accompanied by whispered words or gestures. Scholars still debate the spiritual versus psychological value of these practices, but their effects are tangible. They foster reassurance, create ritualized structure, and cultivate a sense of control in the unpredictability of night. You feel a subtle echo of the same instinct in your own body, a recognition of centuries-old methods of coping with darkness. Animals continue to play a vital role. Cats patrol silently, dogs remain alert, and livestock rest in close proximity to human sleepers. Every creature's behavior is interpreted carefully. A shift in posture or an unusual sound may trigger vigilance or adjustment of sleeping arrangements. Sleep is not purely individual. It is a collaborative, adaptive state, reflecting the presence and needs of other species in the household ecosystem. Oddly, this interdependence creates a serene harmony, a living lullaby of interwoven attention and care. Dream practices remain subtle but essential. Families recount dreams quietly, interpreting omens, events, or insights. You observe an elder listening intently to a child's dream about a glowing flame, offering a small explanation and a protective ritual. Scholars still debate the cultural significance of dream interpretation, but here, it functions as both guidance and reassurance, shaping mental states and fostering calm before rest. Small, deliberate rituals pervade even minor chores. Sweeping, adjusting mats, tending fires, all are done quietly, reinforcing structure and safety. Sleep is cultivated in layers: physical rest, attentiveness, ritualized acts, and environmental awareness. The night is alive, orchestrated by generations of learned behavior and instinctive adaptation. You notice the elegance of these practices, a silent testament to human ingenuity in shaping nocturnal life. You pause to watch a small gathering around a faintly glowing hearth. Adults remain partially awake, tending children, checking surroundings, and maintaining fires. Children drift into sleep in patterned intervals, and you see how vigilance is shared across ages and roles. Sleep is orchestrated, communal, and flexible, a blend of biology, observation, and tradition. Scholars still debate how widespread such habits were, but here, the logic is palpable, deliberate, and effective. Finally, as you step back from the hill's edge, the village sprawls beneath you, quiet but alive with human activity. Moonlight, candle glow, and the faint murmur of movement create a nocturnal tapestry. Sleep here is not passive. It is curated, negotiated, and woven into the fabric of life, reflecting an intricate understanding of safety, ritual, and human psychology. You feel a profound connection to these ancient sleepers, a subtle echo of their rhythm settling in your own body, reminding you that night has always been an active, carefully managed realm of life. You drift from the hillside and move toward a cluster of stone buildings whose silhouettes rise like patient guardians against the moonlit sky. Their edges are softened by centuries of wind and weather: arched doors, narrow windows, tall walls that drink in the night and return only silence. You recognize at once that you're entering a sanctuary space, the kind of religious enclave that shaped both day and night for people 1,000 years ago. As you push open a heavy wooden gate, its groan echoes softly through the courtyard, but no one stirs. Even in sleep, those who rest within these walls maintain a deep, practiced stillness. You wander over flagstones worn smooth by thousands of footsteps. Lanterns sit in carefully chosen places, their flames trimmed low so as not to disturb anyone. The air carries faint fragrances: beeswax from candles, smoke from the evening hearth, and dried herbs tucked into corners. The sanctuary radiates a sense of order so complete you almost feel out of place. Here, sleep isn't just rest, it's regulated, guided, and treated as part of a spiritual rhythm. Scholars still debate whether these nighttime rules were imposed primarily for discipline or for health, but watching the quiet scene unfold, you sense a blend of both. A row of wooden cots lines one wall of a long dormitory room. You notice how each is arranged with care: blankets folded just so, straw refreshed often enough that the scent is faintly sweet rather than musty. You step quietly between them, observing how sleepers lie in positions dictated not by comfort alone but by centuries of ritual. Some rest on their backs, hands folded over their chests. Others lie on their sides with blankets tucked tight beneath their knees. Oddly, you sense a peaceful weight to this uniformity, as though the discipline itself creates a gentle stability. At the far end of the dormitory, a single candle is kept burning. Its flame quivers softly, the only permitted source of light through the night. You watch a monk settle near it on a low stool, eyes half closed but alert. His role is clear: the night attendant. Part guardian, part caretaker, his presence ensures that if someone wakes abruptly, feels ill, or becomes anxious, they are not alone. You feel an unexpected tenderness in this sleep monitored not as surveillance, but as a shared responsibility. Scholars still argue whether such attendants operated from religious obligation or communal necessity, but the result is unmistakable: the sleepers rest with an unspoken assurance that the night is being watched. Chants echo faintly from a chamber nearby, so soft you almost mistake them for wind. You follow the sound to a small stone chapel lit only by the moon through a high, narrow window. A few individuals sit upright on benches, cloaked in wool, whispering rhythmic prayers. These midnight devotions were common, a structured interruption of sleep meant to align the body, mind, and spirit with divine cycles. You sit for a moment, letting the cadence wash over you. The voices rise and fall like breathing, a communal meditative pulse that steadies your own thoughts. Sleep here is planned with almost architectural precision. A first rest, a midnight prayer, a second descent into slumber. After the prayers, the quiet disperses like mist. The participants drift back toward their sleep spaces, their movements slow, deliberate. One of them pauses at a table to adjust an incense holder. A thin plume spirals upward, mugwort mixed with a touch of thyme. The smell is earthy, calming. You've seen mugwort throughout your journey, but here it has a unique purpose: clarity of dreams. Oddly enough, ancient records suggest that certain religious communities believed dreams were a channel for warnings or divine communication. Scholars still argue whether this belief was symbolic or literal, but its influence on nightly ritual is clear. Dreams, in this sanctuary, are not private experiences, they're communal material. Sitting by the incense table, you watch a novice quietly confide a dream from the previous night to an elder, a beam of light crossing water, an unsettling voice calling from the shadows. The elder listens with care, then offers a simple interpretation, connecting the imagery to emotional burdens rather than spiritual omens. The exchange feels surprisingly modern, a blend of empathy, psychology, and quiet reflection. Sleep becomes a bridge between conscious and subconscious worlds, and the sanctuary provides language to navigate that bridge. You wander into a narrow hall where shelves carved from stone hold bundles of dried herbs, beeswax candles, clay cups, and small carved tokens. One token catches your attention, wood-shaped into an eye, painted a deep blue. It's placed above a doorway leading to a small sleeping chamber. A monk passing by notices your interest and gestures silently toward the token. You understand intuitively. A protector symbol, meant to keep nightmares away. Odd, simple, but effective in shaping comfort. Scholars still debate whether such symbols were spiritual tools or psychological anchors, but regardless, they infuse the night with meaning and reassurance. At the rear of the sanctuary lies a garden enclosed by stone walls. The gate is unlatched, so you step through. Moonlight brushes over neat plots of mint, chamomile, rosemary, and rue. A few individuals kneel near the plants, performing a quiet routine, trimming leaves, whispering prayers, checking the soil. These tasks aren't procrastination or boredom, they're part of a nighttime rhythm designed to soothe the mind and prepare it for deep rest. Even the act of touching plants, you realize, eases tension. Scholars still argue whether these nighttime garden rituals began as superstition or therapy, but their calming influence is undeniable. You pause beside a bench where a small bowl sits filled with water. A monk kneels beside it, dipping her fingertips in and brushing them gently over her face before lying down on a nearby mat. Night cleansing rituals appear again, this time refined, deliberate, tied to spiritual preparation rather than mere hygiene. The gesture is slow, almost ceremonial. You sense an intention behind every movement, washing away worry, refreshing the senses, easing the mind into a state where sleep can settle without resistance. The sanctuary turns the simple act of resting into an almost sacred transition. As you walk back toward the main dormitory, you notice the silence here is different from the forest or the village. It has texture, layers of breath, rustle, ember, and heartbeat. The quiet creates a container around the sleepers, protecting them in a way that feels both emotional and practical. A dog sleeps curled near the door, and you note how even the animals seem tuned to the sanctuary's rhythm. When the wind shifts, the dog's ears twitch, but it remains at ease, as though recognizing the safety of the space. You witness another curious practice: shared blankets. 2 or 3 novices sleep close enough to share warmth, the blankets tucked between them to conserve heat. It's both practical and comforting. Scholars still argue whether shared sleep in sanctuaries fostered deeper bonds or simply ensured that no one froze during particularly cold nights. You observe how naturally they settle into these positions, each one adjusting slightly until they fit together like puzzle pieces. Humans have always been resourceful in creating warmth, connection, and comfort. A bell chimes lightly somewhere deeper within the sanctuary, not loud enough to wake most, but firm enough to signal a shift in the night. A few individuals rise, their motions unhurried. You follow them to a small side chamber where they sit for a brief reading or reflection. This midnight watch, a common practice in many religious communities, serves both spiritual and practical functions, keeping the flame of devotion alive and ensuring the sanctuary remains safe. You stand quietly, absorbing the calm dedication in the room. It feels almost like drifting through a dream with your eyes open. When the brief watch concludes, the participants return to their bedding. You observe the second descent into sleep, the way each person settles, adjusts their blanket, takes a slow breath. The transition is gentle, ritualized, almost choreographed by centuries of repetition. Sleep here isn't merely rest, it's part of the sanctuary's rhythm. You marvel at how these practices blend structure and softness, creating an environment where the body understands exactly when to let go. You take one last slow turn around the dormitory. A novice stirs and shifts position. Another sighs softly, settling deeper into the straw. The night attendant adjusts the candle wick, lowering the flame so it barely flickers. The room breathes in unison, humans, herbs, stone, and silence woven into a single fabric. You feel the atmosphere sink gently into your own bones, a comforting weight that quiets your thoughts. Finally, you step back into the courtyard. Moonlight pools around your feet, washing the stone in a pale shimmer. The sanctuary rises behind you, serene and timeless, a testament to how humans once shaped sleep into a spiritual craft. Here, rest was part prayer, part ritual, part survival. The night was not feared but respected, and with respect came mastery. As you close the gate quietly, you feel centuries of calm echo in your footsteps, guiding you onward through the story of ancient sleep. You leave the sanctuary walls behind, stepping into a narrow stone lane that twists and dips like a secret whispered between buildings. Moonlight spills over the rooftops and trickles down to your feet in thin silver ribbons. The air is different here, warmer than the forest, less fragrant than the sanctuary, but buzzing with that peculiar stillness found only in the moments when everyone thinks no one is awake. You wander deeper until faint murmurs drift from a courtyard tucked between two homes. Someone is awake, and you're about to witness one of the most quietly controversial habits humans carried 1,000 years ago, the forbidden midnight meal. You slip into the courtyard's shadow as a family gathers around a small clay stove, its embers glowing like sleepy eyes. A man ladles something thick and fragrant into bowls while whispering to two children who giggle behind their hands. You can practically smell the stew, root vegetables, grains, a hint of garlic. It looks warm and deeply comforting, the kind of food you'd crave at precisely the wrong time of night. And it was the wrong time, at least according to tradition. Scholars still argue whether these nighttime meals were frowned upon because of superstition, scarcity, or religious rules, but the consensus is clear: eating at midnight wasn't just unusual, it was considered rebellious. You watch them spoon slow bites into their mouths, careful not to clatter their bowls. There's something delightfully mischievous about it, like a low-stakes crime committed purely for warmth and comfort. Oddly, you feel your own stomach respond, even though the scene happened centuries ago and you're only drifting through it. Midnight meals were never meant to be feasts. They were meant to satisfy a gnawing emptiness, hunger, fear, or even the quiet loneliness of waking in the dark. In another corner of the courtyard, you notice a different ritual unfolding. A grandmother breaks a tiny piece of bread and dips it into a bowl of herbs before placing it on a flat stone. An offering. You've seen this habit in forests and villages, but here it carries a distinct flavor, an attempt to appease spirits who might disapprove of eating at forbidden hours. Scholars still debate whether such offerings were symbolic apologies or protective gestures to ensure the family didn't suffer indigestion, nightmares, or supernatural reprimands. But the intention is unmistakable. If you're going to break a rule, leave a little something behind to soften the blow. You wander down the path and enter another home through an open door. A single lantern glows on a table where a woman sits, nibbling at dried fruit with deliberate slowness. She closes her eyes between bites, savoring each chew as though she's extracting not just flavor but comfort from the act. Night eating wasn't always about hunger. Sometimes it was refuge, a moment away from family, chores, rigid schedules, and the unblinking expectations of daily life. You can feel her exhale, a long, quiet release that seems to sink into the wooden walls around her. In the same room, a little boy stirs from sleep, sits up, and pads silently to the table. The woman doesn't scold him. Instead, she pulls a bowl from beneath the table and places it in front of him. He dips his fingers into a mix of warm grains and honey, licking them clean. You smile as you watch. Even 1,000 years ago, parents knew the truth. Sometimes a snack solves problems faster than a lecture. Oddly, the boy falls asleep again right at the table, head resting on his arms, sticky fingers curled like tiny question marks. You step outside and wander further until you reach a cluster of clay homes lit from within. Here, the tone shifts. A group of older villagers gather around a pot of hot water infused with herbs, mint, fennel, chamomile. Instead of food, they sip fragrant teas meant to calm the stomach or ward off restlessness. Scholars still argue whether these nighttime brews were medicinal, spiritual, or purely habitual, but the effect is soothing even from where you stand. Steam curls around their faces like soft, invisible veils. They speak in murmurs about dreams, weather signs, rumors from travelers. Midnight becomes a moment for reflection, connection, and quiet rebellion all at once. As you watch them sip, you notice something quirky. The group passes around a small carved token shaped like a fish. Each person touches it lightly before taking a drink. An odd tradition, but one that clearly matters. Some sources suggest such tokens symbolized abundance or protection during vulnerable nighttime hours. Scholars still debate whether this was rooted in religion or superstition, but you feel the weight of the gesture, a tactile reassurance passed from hand to hand. A few steps away, you notice young adults clustered behind a house, sharing bites of cold bread and dried berries while whisper laughing in the shadows. This feels less like ritual and more like teenage defiance, sneaking food after curfew, bonding over the thrill of breaking small, harmless rules. You can't help but grin. Some things, it seems, are timeless. Their laughter is soft but warm, rising into the night air like sparks from an unseen fire. As you slip down another lane, you enter a space humming with activity. Chickens rustle in a co-op, goats shift on their bedding, and someone is shooing a stubborn cat away from a pot. You watch a farmer spoon leftovers into a bowl for his animals. Nighttime feeding wasn't always meant for humans. Livestock had their own rhythms, and occasionally a goat or cow would wake hungry, restless, or noisy enough to risk disturbing the whole household. Feeding animals at night wasn't forbidden, but humans snacking during the same ritual. That towed the line. You watch the farmer sneak a bite of bread when he thinks no one can see. Spoiler. You definitely saw. Inside one of the more spacious homes, you discover a family seated around a table cluttered with pottery. They're eating something that looks suspiciously like late-night porridge. The father keeps glancing at the doorway, as though expecting a village elder to burst in and scold them. But no one comes. Instead, they enjoy their feast quietly, sharing stories that wouldn't surface in the daytime. Night loosens tongues. Secrets become lighter. Worries soften. You can feel the intimate warmth in the room, the kind that only exists when everyone else is asleep. You drift toward the back of the home where a young girl sits alone near a small altar. She picks up a tiny pinch of grain and places it in front of a candle as an offering, another apology for eating past approved hours. She whispers something too quiet to catch. Her movements are thoughtful, reverent. Scholars still argue whether such rituals protected the household or simply eased personal guilt, but either way, they transform the act of eating into something meaningful. Something mindful. Outside again, you wander through a plaza where the moon strikes the cobblestones in pale geometric shapes. The whole village feels suspended in a dreamlike hush. You catch subtle signs of more midnight indulgences, empty bowls left discreetly near doors, crumbs brushed off windowsills, the faint scent of cooked grains lingering in the air. It's oddly comforting to see how universal these stolen moments were. Even in cultures obsessed with rules, structure, and order, humans always carved out small slivers of freedom under the cover of darkness. You make your way to a quiet corner where two elders sit on low stools, sharing what looks like a small pastry. They break it gently, each taking a piece, and then sit in silence, chewing thoughtfully. They don't seem rebellious at all, only tired, hungry, and oddly content. Their eyes reflect the moonlight as if they've made peace with the idea that rules are guidelines, not cages. You sit with them for a moment, feeling the serenity settle around you like a soft blanket. Before you leave this village, you notice one last scene. A mother adjusting her child's blanket after a small night snack has lulled the child back into slumber. She tucks them in with an effortless tenderness that transcends time. A thin curl of steam escapes from a pot still warm on the hearth. You feel the echo of the moment in your chest, simple, human, and endlessly relatable. Eventually, you step away, letting the quiet village settle back into its rhythm. Midnight meals may have been frowned upon, whispered about, or hidden in shadows, but they reveal something universal. In the stillness of night, humans reach for comfort. Warmth, connection, safety. Whether through a spoonful of porridge, a sip of herbal tea, or a stolen bite of fruit, people found ways to soothe themselves when the darkness felt heavy. You carry that warmth with you as you wander onward, guided now by the faint glow of dawn creeping over the horizon. You follow the faint glow on the horizon as night thins into something softer, something that feels like breath held too long finally releasing. The air shifts, the cool, heavy stillness of darkness easing into a gentler, almost hopeful breeze. You wander through the same village you've been tracing for hours, but now everything looks different. Shadows retreat, colors stretch awake, and the people, those ancient sleepers and wakeful watchers, begin to stir in ways that reveal the final layer of their strange, forgotten nighttime habits. Someone yawns loudly behind a wooden door, so loudly that a chicken outside startles and flaps into the nearest fence. You pause, amused. Dawn was never a quiet moment 1,000 years ago. Humans treated it like a messy handoff between night duties and daytime responsibilities. No one glided gracefully from sleep to waking. They lurched, shuffled, groaned, and muttered their way into the day. And oddly, you find it charming. You step closer to a small courtyard where a woman pushes open a heavy shutter. She squints into the dim light as though the sun personally offended her. Her hair is a disaster. Her blanket is still wrapped around her shoulders like a disgruntled cape. You recognize the look instantly. It's the universal, I am awake but not happy about it. Scholars still debate whether ancient morning moods were influenced by segmented sleep or dietary habits, but honestly, watching her, you're pretty sure humans have always been grumpy at sunrise. In the home across from hers, a man bursts out of the doorway with surprising energy, stretching his arms high, cracking his back, then immediately tripping over his own sandals. He mutters something you thankfully can't hear clearly. His wife follows behind him, clutching a small clay jar. The moment she steps outside, she lifts the jar to her nose and inhales deeply. Aromatic herbs. A pick-me-up blend. You've seen these jars before at night, but at dawn they serve a different purpose, clearing the mind after dream-heavy sleep. Scholars still argue whether these herbal inhalations were medical or spiritual, but they clearly made mornings easier. You wander farther, watching the village stretch itself awake. A child stumbles out of a doorway, hair sticking straight out like it's trying to escape from her head. She scratches her cheek, yawns, and immediately starts chasing a cat with no actual plan in mind. Dawn does strange things to small humans. But there's a ritual here too. Children often ran or jumped early in the morning to shake off lingering dreams or night spirits, believed to cling to them until movement scattered the last traces. Oddly, you watch her spin in place, and for a moment, you almost feel lighter too. Nearby, a group of elders sit on low stools, muttering to one another about their dreams before the details slip away. Dream sharing was strongest at dawn, not midnight. You listen as one man describes a dream of a horse running through water. His companion interprets it as a sign of coming rain. Another claims it means the man ate too much grain last night. Scholars still debate whether these interpretations had practical influence on daily decisions, but it's clear they shaped the emotional start of each day. Dawn wasn't about small talk. It was about decoding your subconscious before chores stole your attention. You continue along the main road as candles inside homes flicker out one by one. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin, determined trails. Someone splashes water on their face from a stone basin, shivering at the cold shock. Another person shakes out their bedding aggressively, as though banishing the last remnants of darkness. Bedding wasn't just cleaned in the morning, it was symbolically reset. The night was over, and with it, any fear, omen, or dream that overstayed its welcome. A woman stands near a well, rubbing her arms briskly while reciting a soft morning charm. These charms weren't prayers exactly, they were little protective phrases whispered to guard the household from whatever might have slipped through the cracks during the night. Scholars still argue whether such habits were superstition, coping mechanisms, or a mixture of both, but the effect is clear: people felt grounded when they said them. Safe, ready, collected. Farther up the road, two men argue playfully about who overslept more. One blames the moon, the other blames the cold. Mutual teasing at dawn was a long-standing habit, a way of shaking off grogginess through humor. Oddly, it feels like an ancient version of, "Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee." Except instead of coffee, they have cold water, leftover bread, and a son that doesn't care how tired they are. You approach a stable where livestock stir with their own morning habits. A cow low moos irritably, clearly unimpressed with life. A goat bleats sharply at a boy whose only crime was existing. Animals played a role in waking humans. Their restlessness signaled the shift from quiet watchfulness to active preparation. 1,000 years ago, dawn wasn't defined by sunlight, it was defined by animal noise. Lots of it. Someone in a nearby home bangs a pot. Once, twice, a third time. You jump a little, then realize it's intentional. Morning signaling. Certain households didn't rely on roosters alone, they had their own rituals for declaring dawn officially underway. Scholars still debate whether these morning noises served communal or familial purposes, but either way, they worked. Suddenly, more shutters open. More humans stumble out. Dawn ripples through the village like a slow, clumsy wave. You drift past a small enclosed garden where a young woman kneels among herbs. Instead of nighttime trimming or whisper prayers, she collects specific leaves meant to seal the day. Rosemary for alertness, basil for grounding, rue for protection. She presses a few leaves into a pouch she'll carry with her. You feel a flicker of recognition. Humans have always sought ways to anchor themselves as they move from sleep into wakefulness. A little farther on, you stumble onto a quirky habit: first sunlight gazing. Not staring directly, thank goodness, this isn't a medieval eye exam, but turning the face toward the earliest warm glow and letting it rest there. Some believed morning light purified the mind. Others thought it burned off lingering spirits. Scholars still argue whether these early light rituals had tangible circadian benefits, but watching these villagers soak in the dawn, you can't deny the calm it brings. Then comes one of the strangest behaviors you've seen all night: dawn sweeping. Someone sweeps their doorway not inside out but outside in. It looks wrong, like sweeping dirt into your house. But no, the idea was to sweep luck inward for the day. Scholars still debate whether this practice was widespread or isolated, but the gesture is mesmerizing. The broom moves slowly, deliberately, almost lovingly. You feel its quiet intention: bring good things home. Keep bad things out. A group of teenagers stumble sleepily into the open square, hair wild, clothes askew. They move like undercooked noodles. Someone elbows someone else. Someone yawns with the tragic drama of a poet whose work was interrupted. These young ones don't have midnight rituals or dawn responsibilities as intense as adults, but their presence shows another truth: dawn was a reset point for everyone, no matter how little sleep they had. You wait, watching as the sun finally crests fully over the horizon. Light spills into the village with gentle confidence, filling cracks, warming stones, and revealing details that were mere suggestion in the dark. And suddenly, the last of the nighttime habits appears: gratitude. Quiet, subtle, not shouted or formalized. A woman touches her heart. A child kisses his fingers and presses them to the sky. A man bows his head without breaking stride. Tiny gestures, barely noticeable, but deeply felt. Dawn was survival. Dawn was renewal. Dawn was proof that they made it through another night of risks, spirits, dreams, pests, shadows, and the weight of the unknown. You take a slow breath in this light, and the entire world seems to soften around you. The rituals, the rhythms, the strangeness, they all converge into a final understanding. Ancient sleep wasn't just sleep. It was an ecosystem of care, coping, community, and instinct, shaped by everything from fear to tenderness. Dawn completed it. Dawn sealed it. Dawn reshaped the night into memory. You step back, letting the village come fully alive behind you as the last hints of darkness dissolve into day. You find yourself standing at the edge of the village, the sun now spilling golden warmth over rooftops and cobblestones. The night you've wandered through, the quiet streets, the flickering lanterns, the whispered rituals, has left its mark on you, like a soft imprint on your mind. Each breath feels lighter, each sound richer, as if the echoes of centuries-old sleepers still hum in the air. You notice the gentle sway of leaves in the morning breeze, the faint coo of a dove perched atop a distant roof, and the slow, deliberate steps of villagers beginning their day. It's all alive, yet calm, an invitation to carry serenity into your own waking hours. You wander slowly along the sunlit streets, noticing how small details now reveal themselves in clarity. The way dew clings to herbs in morning gardens, the soft texture of worn stones underfoot, the lingering scent of bread and herbs from hearths long since extinguished. Each moment feels intimate, as though the night has unfolded just for you, a private tour of human ingenuity and quiet resilience. Odd quirks, forgotten customs, midnight snacks, protective charms, they all blend seamlessly with everyday life, forming a tapestry of comfort and care. Scholars may debate their purpose, but the effect is undeniable, a sense of rhythm, connection, and continuity stretching across time. You pause to take it all in, letting your body relax with the rhythm of centuries. You feel your muscles ease, your thoughts slow, and a subtle warmth settle into your chest. Imagine the softness of straw beneath you, the gentle flicker of candlelight, the hushed breathing of neighbors, the quiet hum of wind through the trees. The night and dawn are no longer separate, they're a continuous story of humanity learning, adapting, and seeking rest. Finally, you close your eyes and allow the memory of this journey to wash over you like a soft, protective blanket. The night's strange habits, its whispered secrets, its tender rituals, they are all tucked gently into your mind, leaving you feeling safe, connected, and ready to drift fully into your own sleep. Sweet dreams.